Dinner at Daniel. The reservation at Daniel is for 8:30 p.m. and I arrive exactly on time because punctuality is a form of dominance that most people don't understand. The restaurant's interior is exactly what you'd expect from a place that charges $400 per person for dinner. Crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people make in a year. Mahogany paneling that was imported from forests that no longer exist. Persian rugs that were hand-woven by children in sweatshops that humanitarian organizations pretend to care about. The entire aesthetic screams old European money, even though most of the clientele made their fortunes through cryptocurrency manipulation and pharmaceutical price gouging. The maitre d' recognizes me immediately because I tip him $500 every month to ensure that I always get the table I want when I want it. His name is Francois and he's wearing what appears to be a custom-tailored tuxedo that probably costs more than his annual salary. He went to hotel management school in Switzerland where he learned to grovel professionally and speak multiple languages with the kind of accent that makes wealthy people feel sophisticated. His shoes are polished to a mirror shine and his posture is perfect, and when he sees me approaching he smiles with exactly the right combination of respect and obsequiousness. Monsieur Vale, Francois says while guiding me through the dining room past tables filled with oligarchs and pharmaceutical executives and arms dealers who all look like respectable businessmen until you research their offshore banking arrangements. Your usual table is ready. Will you be dining alone this evening? I'm expecting 3 guests, I reply while scanning the dining room to catalog the other diners and estimate their net worth based on their watches and shoes and the way they hold their wine glasses. Harrison, Blackwell, and Montgomery. Send them over when they arrive. The table Francois shows me to has a perfect view of the entire dining room, which allows me to observe other diners without appearing to stare. This is important because most of my business relationships are built on information asymmetry and psychological manipulation. Knowing who eats with whom and what they discuss over dinner gives me advantages in negotiations that my competitors don't understand. Rich people are incredibly predictable in their dining habits and restaurant choices. They always sit at the same tables and order the same wines and discuss the same topics with the same people. This predictability makes them easy to manipulate if you're paying attention to the patterns. The wine list at Daniel contains over 1,500 selections, with some bottles costing more than most people's annual salaries. I order a 1996 Chateau Le Pin that costs $8,000 per bottle because the markup on wine is how restaurants separate serious diners from tourists and middle-class pretenders. The sommelier who brings the wine is wearing a silver tastevin around his neck and approaches the table with the kind of reverence that sommeliers reserve for bottles that cost more than their monthly rent. His name is Philippe and he went to wine school in Burgundy where he learned to detect flavor notes that don't actually exist and speak about wine with the kind of pretentious vocabulary that makes insecure rich people feel educated. Excellent choice, Monsieur Vale, Philippe says while presenting the bottle like it's a religious artifact instead of fermented grape juice that happens to be very expensive. This particular vintage is drinking beautifully right now. Would you like me to decant it? No decanting, I tell him because I want to see the label when I pour each glass so my dinner guests understand exactly how much money I'm spending on their entertainment. Just bring 4 glasses and leave the bottle on the table. While I'm waiting for my guests to arrive, I observe the other diners and mentally catalog their weaknesses and vulnerabilities. 2 tables away there's a pharmaceutical executive named Richardson who is dining with his wife and another couple. Richardson is wearing what appears to be a chiton suit in navy blue that costs at least $12,000. His shirt is white cotton with French cuffs and platinum cufflinks. His tie is Hermes silk in a conservative pattern. His watch is a Patek Philippe Calatrava in white gold that costs approximately $100,000. His wife is wearing a black cocktail dress that's probably Chanel and diamond jewelry that's definitely real and expensive enough to fund a small humanitarian mission. What Richardson doesn't know is that I've been shorting his company's stock for the past 6 months because I have inside information about an FDA investigation that will be announced next week. The investigation concerns falsified clinical trial data for a cancer drug that Richardson's company has been marketing to terminally ill patients. When the FDA announcement becomes public, Richardson stock will crash and I'll make approximately $40 million in profit while his company's patients discover that the drug they've been taking is not only ineffective but actually accelerates tumor growth in certain genetic populations. The ironic thing is that Richardson probably thinks he's helping cancer patients while I know for certain that he's killing them for profit. But my profit will be much larger than his profit because I understand how information asymmetry works in pharmaceutical markets. Bad news for drug companies is good news for people who are smart enough to bet against them. Every dead cancer patient represents a measurable decrease in Richardson's stock price and a corresponding increase in my net worth. Harrison arrives first, and the way he moves through the dining room tells me immediately that his pharmaceutical business is going well. He's wearing what appears to be a Tom Ford suit in charcoal gray that fits perfectly across his shoulders and chest. His shirt is light blue cotton with a spread collar and silver cufflinks that might be Tiffany. His tie is navy blue silk with a subtle pattern that suggests expensive taste without ostentatious display. His shoes are black leather captos that are polished to a high shine. His watch is a Rolex Daytona in steel and gold that costs about $30,000. His overall appearance suggests someone who makes between $5 and $10 million per year and spends approximately 20% of that on clothing and accessories. Harrison went to Princeton, where he studied chemistry and learned how to synthesize controlled substances without getting caught by federal agents. After graduation, he started a legitimate pharmaceutical company that serves as a front for his real business, which is manufacturing and distributing designer drugs to wealthy clients who want to enhance their cognitive performance or sexual stamina without the side effects of traditional medications. His clients include hedge fund managers who need Adderall without the crash, and real estate developers who need Viagra without the heart problems, and tech entrepreneurs who need antidepressants without the weight gain. Preston, Harrison says while settling into his chair with the casual confidence of someone who has never been arrested despite committing multiple federal crimes on a daily basis. Thanks for making the reservation. This place is impossible to get into without connections. Connections are everything in our business, I reply while pouring wine that costs more per glass than most people spend on entertainment in a month. How's the new product line performing? Better than expected, Harrison says while accepting his wine glass with the kind of appreciation that people show when they understand they're drinking something that most people will never be able to afford. The cognitive enhancer we discussed is generating incredible demand among financial sector clients. $1,500 per dose, and we can't manufacture it fast enough. The cognitive enhancer Harrison is referring to is a combination of modafinil, amphetamine salts, and a novel nootropic compound that he synthesizes in a laboratory that's officially registered as a vitamin supplement manufacturing facility. The drug provides sustained focus and enhanced memory formation for approximately 12 hours without the jittery side effects of traditional stimulants. What Harrison's clients don't know is that the long-term effects include permanent changes to dopamine receptor sensitivity and increased risk of psychotic episodes in individuals with certain genetic predispositions. Blackwell arrives 10 minutes later, and I can tell immediately from his body language that his human trafficking business is experiencing some operational challenges. He's wearing what appears to be a Brioni suit in navy blue that would normally suggest success and prosperity, but his tie is slightly askew and his hair is not perfectly styled, and there are stress lines around his eyes that weren't there the last time we had dinner together. His watch is still a Patek Philippe Nautilus in rose gold, but he's wearing it on the wrong wrist, which suggests he's been changing his routine to avoid surveillance or because he's developed some kind of nervous habit. Blackwell went to Yale Law School, where he learned how to structure business transactions in ways that appear completely legal on paper but are actually designed to facilitate activities that would result in life sentences if federal prosecutors could prove criminal intent. His specialty is creating shell companies and offshore trusts that allow wealthy clients to move people and money across international borders without triggering reporting requirements or background checks. His legitimate business is immigration law, but his real business is providing documentation and transportation services for human trafficking operations that supply domestic workers and sex slaves to wealthy clients who prefer not to deal with employment agencies or dating applications. Gentlemen, Blackwell says while accepting his wine glass with hands that are trembling slightly, which suggests either medical problems or law enforcement pressure. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible and my driver took a wrong turn. This is obviously a lie because Blackwell's driver is a former Navy SEAL who knows Manhattan better than most taxi drivers and never makes navigation errors. The real reason Blackwell is late is probably because he was meeting with federal agents or disposing of evidence or both. The trembling in his hands could be caused by stress or medication or the early stages of alcoholism, which is common among people who profit from human suffering and try to cope with the psychological consequences through substance abuse. Montgomery arrives last and his appearance immediately tells me that his organ harvesting business is experiencing unprecedented success. He's wearing what appears to be a Savile Row suit that was custom-tailored in London and costs at least $20,000. His shirt is white cotton with a spread collar and platinum cufflinks that are probably Cartier. His tie is burgundy silk that matches his pocket square perfectly. His shoes are handmade Oxfords that were probably crafted by John Lobb or George Cleverly. His watch is a Vacheron Constantine that costs more than most people's houses. Everything about his appearance screams old money and medical expertise and social respectability. Montgomery went to Harvard Medical School where he graduated summa cum laude and completed his residency in cardiac surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital. His legitimate practice focuses on heart transplants for wealthy patients who can afford to pay cash for medical procedures that insurance companies consider experimental or unnecessary. His illegitimate practice focuses on harvesting organs from healthy donors who are told they're participating in medical research studies but are actually being murdered for their kidneys and livers and hearts, which are then transplanted into wealthy clients who don't ask questions about organ sourcing as long as the procedures are successful. Preston, Harrison, Blackwell, Montgomery says while taking his seat with the kind of graceful movements that suggest years of surgical training and manual dexterity that can only be developed through practice on living tissue. I hope you haven't started without me. I had to finish a procedure that ran longer than expected. The procedure Montgomery is referring to is probably the harvest of a complete organ set from some homeless person or illegal immigrant who responded to a Craigslist advertisement for paid medical research. Montgomery's organ harvesting operations generate approximately $50 million per year in revenue by targeting vulnerable populations who don't have family members or social connections that would notice if they disappeared permanently. The beautiful efficiency of his business model is that he eliminates the supply problem by creating his own donors rather than waiting for natural deaths or accident victims. The dinner conversation begins with small talk about market conditions and regulatory changes but gradually shifts toward more specific discussions of our respective business operations. Harrison mentions that his pharmaceutical manufacturing facility is expanding into fentanyl production because the profit margins are incredible and the customer base is growing exponentially due to prescription opioid addiction rates. Blackwell discusses his plans to diversify into child trafficking because wealthy clients are willing to pay premium prices for younger victims and law enforcement agencies are less aggressive about investigating crimes involving minors from poor families. Montgomery describes his new mobile organ harvesting operation, which allows him to perform extractions in remote locations and transport organs to recipients within the critical time window for successful transplantation. The mobile unit is disguised as a medical emergency response vehicle and staffed by surgeons who think they're providing humanitarian aid to disaster victims. What they don't know is that the disasters are artificially created situations designed to provide cover for organ harvesting operations in areas where law enforcement response is delayed or non-existent. The appetizer course consists of ossetra caviar that costs $400 per ounce served with traditional accompaniments that add another $100 to the price. While we're eating fish eggs that cost more than most people's weekly groceries, we discuss the logistical challenges of coordinating our various criminal enterprises without triggering federal investigation or interagency cooperation. The key is maintaining operational security through compartmentalization and plausible deniability while maximizing profit through vertical integration and market manipulation. Harrison explains how his pharmaceutical business provides the drugs necessary for Blackwell's human trafficking operations. Sedatives for transportation, stimulants for performance enhancement, antibiotics for infection prevention, and contraceptives for pregnancy avoidance. Blackwell's trafficking network provides the test subjects necessary for Harrison's drug development and the organ donors necessary for Montgomery's transplant operations. Montgomery's medical expertise provides the healthcare services necessary to keep Harrison's manufacturing workers healthy and Blackwell's trafficking victims functional. My role in this arrangement is providing the financial services necessary to launder profits and coordinate payments between the different business units. I structure cryptocurrency transactions that convert drug money into real estate investments and human trafficking proceeds into legitimate stock purchases and organ harvesting revenues into offshore trust funds. The beautiful synergy of our partnership is that each business unit supports and enhances the others while maintaining enough operational separation to prevent comprehensive law enforcement investigation. The main course is Japanese Wagyu beef that costs $200 per pound, served with vegetables that were probably grown in soil enriched with human remains from Montgomery's disposal operations. While we're eating beef that costs more than most people's monthly rent, we discuss expansion opportunities and market development strategies for the coming year. Harrison wants to increase fentanyl production to meet growing demand for middle-class suburbanites who became addicted to prescription painkillers after dental procedures or minor surgeries. Blackwell wants to expand his trafficking network into Central American countries where political instability and economic desperation create large populations of potential victims who can be acquired cheaply and transported efficiently. Montgomery wants to develop new harvesting techniques that allow him to extract more organs per donor and preserve them for longer periods, which would expand his potential customer base and increase profit margins per procedure. My contribution to these expansion plans is developing new cryptocurrency mixing protocols that can handle larger transaction volumes without triggering regulatory scrutiny or blockchain analysis by law enforcement agencies. I'm also working on shell company structures that can support more complex international operations while maintaining the legal protections and tax advantages that allow us to operate with impunity in multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. The dessert course is a chocolate souffle that probably contains cocoa beans harvested by the same child slaves who manufactured the phones we use to coordinate our criminal activities. While we're eating dessert that costs more than most people spend on birthday celebrations, we discuss the philosophical implications of our business operations and the moral frameworks that allow us to profit from human suffering without experiencing psychological distress or ethical conflicts. Harrison maintains that his pharmaceutical business is actually providing valuable services to people who wouldn't otherwise have access to cognitive enhancement or performance improvement drugs. He argues that the side effects and addiction potential are acceptable risks that informed consumers should be allowed to assume voluntarily. The fact that most of his customers don't understand the risks or can't afford the consequences is irrelevant from his perspective, because personal responsibility and market freedom are more important than consumer protection or public health. Blackwell argues that his trafficking operations are actually rescue missions that save people from poverty and political persecution by providing them with employment opportunities and housing arrangements in wealthy countries. The fact that his employment opportunities involve sexual slavery and domestic servitude and his housing arrangements involve basement prisons and shipping containers is irrelevant from his perspective, because the alternative would be starvation or death in their countries of origin. Montgomery argues that his organ harvesting operations are actually charitable endeavors that redistribute biological resources from people who don't need them to people who do need them. The fact that his donors don't consent to the redistribution and die during the harvesting process is irrelevant from his perspective, because the recipients are wealthy and productive members of society whose lives are more valuable than the lives of homeless people and illegal immigrants. My contribution to this philosophical discussion is explaining how financial markets are fundamentally amoral systems that allocate resources based on efficiency and profit maximization rather than ethical considerations or social justice. The fact that my trading strategies cause famine and hyperinflation and economic collapse in developing countries is irrelevant from my perspective, because market forces are natural phenomena that exist beyond human moral frameworks. By the time we finish dinner, we've consumed $800 worth of food and $12,000 worth of wine while discussing business operations that generate hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenue through activities that would result in multiple life sentences if law enforcement agencies had the competence and resources necessary to investigate and prosecute complex international criminal enterprises. The beautiful irony is that we look exactly like legitimate businessmen having a normal dinner conversation about market opportunities and operational challenges. Any observer would see four well-dressed successful professionals discussing business strategies over expensive food and wine. They would have no idea that they're witnessing a coordination meeting between some of the most successful criminals in the global economy. The check arrives and totals $14,000, which I pay with a black American Express card that has no spending limit because my monthly income exceeds most people's lifetime earnings. The waiter who processes the payment probably makes minimum wage plus tips and has no idea that his tip alone is more money than he'll make in the next 6 months of honest work. As we're leaving the restaurant, I notice that Richardson and his wife are still at their table discussing what appears to be vacation plans or anniversary arrangements. They have no idea that their pharmaceutical company stock will crash next week and destroy their net worth and force them to sell their Hampton house and withdraw their children from private school. The thought of their impending financial ruin makes me smile as I walk past their table toward the exit. Outside Daniel, the October air is crisp and the streets are filled with people who have no idea how the global economy actually works or who controls the systems that determine their financial futures. They're all economic slaves who think they're free because they can choose between different brands of products and different employers who exploit their labor in slightly different ways. The valet brings my Cybertruck and I tip him $100 because conspicuous generosity is a form of psychological warfare that makes working-class people grateful for the opportunity to serve people who view them as disposable resources. The valet thanks me enthusiastically and probably goes home to tell his family about the generous rich man who made his night special. As I drive through Manhattan toward my penthouse, I think about how perfectly the evening went and how efficiently we coordinated our various criminal enterprises without saying anything that could be used as evidence in a federal prosecution. The art of criminal conspiracy is knowing how to communicate complex illegal activities through conversations that sound completely innocent to anyone who doesn't understand the code words and euphemisms that professionals use to discuss their work. Tomorrow I'll execute the trading strategies we discussed tonight and generate millions of dollars in profit while Harrison manufactures drugs that will kill thousands of people and Blackwell traffics humans who will be tortured and enslaved, and Montgomery harvests organs from victims who will be murdered for their biological resources. But tonight we're just four successful businessmen who enjoyed an expensive dinner and stimulating conversation about market opportunities and operational efficiency. The beautiful thing about being rich is that money makes everything legal as long as you structure your activities correctly and maintain relationships with the right people in law enforcement and regulatory agencies. Poor people go to prison for stealing hundreds of dollars while rich people get government bailouts for stealing billions of dollars. It's not really about justice or morality. It's about understanding how power works and having enough money to buy the protection and immunity that keeps successful criminals out of prison and unsuccessful criminals behind bars.